All right, everybody. We've got 3 very special guests for y'all this week. I want everybody to welcome to the show J.L. Collins, or Jason Collins, Jay Shiek, and Leland Bjerg. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm super proud of Chris for getting the names right, because that was 3 in a row. The pressure was on. You've come a long way, dude. I mean, 300 plus episodes. I'm happy you got it.
I know. I've already unleashed the beast today, so you'd think I'd be starring.
Yeah, they're not real monsters. Those are the alcoholic monsters. So, I'm rooting for you. But no, thanks for being here, guys. I know we're both really excited to talk about Thistle. As we're recording, it will be out tomorrow on Kickstarter. So, that's really cool. Thanks ahead of time for that. For sending the review copy. And Chris and I don't get to read all the review copies we get, but I saw that one and I was like, okay, I'm really big into fantasy. And we could talk about that too in regards to the book, but I really enjoyed it. I know we have some questions for you, but I mean, our first time guests, we always do some sort of origin story, that kind of thing. But I don't know if you guys want to just tackle the question of, how it came about. You all started working on this project together, where this idea came for Thistle and this awesome story about a necromancer. I don't know where we start, if it's JL or anybody else.
But. Sure. No, I appreciate that, Mike.
Yeah.
The short, I'll try and make the short answer in the interest of time and to give my team all the time to talk. But in 2020, I was working from home during the pandemic. And in doing so, I got to catch Gail Simone's comic school event that she ran on the site formerly known as Twitter, encouraging amateur comic creators, writers, and so forth to basically write an 8-page script. And it was sort of an exercise in writing outside your comfort zone, writing something different. You would literally roll the dice and you would have a genre list and you'd choose a genre from the list. And when I did that, I rolled and I got horror. And I'm like, well, horror is not my first choice of a genre, but this is the whole point of the exercise. I wasn't regularly writing comics at this point. I just kind of rediscovered it again as something that I wanted to do. I'd taken a long hiatus, which just happens due to life. And then she threw a twist saying, okay, we'll roll a second time if you wish and add a second genre if you wish. I rolled the second time and I got fantasy, horror fantasy. It came to me within moments of getting that, where I'm like an elf behind enemy lines fighting the undead alone. And that I just ran with that. And the excitement was immediate from there. And that was the genesis of what Thistle eventually became. After completing that script, 8 pages as an exercise, and part of it was because Gail had generously said she would do her best to try and read everyone's stories. You wouldn't get individual feedback, but it was the idea that it's somebody that you sort of can respect in the industry, and that's somebody who's doing her very best to encourage and support all of the upcoming creators. To say that they would take a moment to maybe look over your work was a huge incentive, and so in doing so, it was the motivation I needed to kind of just get that going again. And then from there, it was like, okay, well, you've got an 8-page script, smart guy, but are you actually going to try and create a comic from it? And by this point, I had met and sort of connected with Leland, and we were starting to collaborate on ideas and just crunching in weekly workshops our comics and our scripts and such. And I said, okay, I'm going to turn this 8-page into a full-length comic script. And I did so. And then I needed an artist. And then it was back to the site formerly known as Twitter to search our amazing comic community, which is how I found Jay. And basically pitched him cold and said, listen, man, I got an idea for a fantasy comic. You don't know me. Here's my idea. Here's what I want to do. Are you in or out? And he's like, I'm in. and then we were off to the races at that point. And they can fill it in from their perspective on that side. But it was just something that came from a writing exercise that became a story that became a comic. And so I'm really proud of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I guess we'll just go down the line. Jay, what was your experience getting involved? Because I know Chris and I had talked about the art quite a bit, and that being such a huge part of why we enjoyed the book. So
I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's Jill nailed it with that. The site formerly known as Twitter, I'd say even to this day, was responsible for a huge amount of the opportunities that I got for paid and commercial work. I saw fantasy and horror in the body of the email without even necessarily reading the connecting sentences that tied it all together. I didn't really feel equipped to say no. We've gone through some different iterations of the story, and it's allowed a lot of it to evolve around the character and other characters and really the world itself. So it's been kind of a long time coming, but it's been a lot of fun to visually explore that with this team.
Yeah, and I wanted to say just about the art in general. I would say we typically notice these things for general comics. I mean, not the typical like panel breakup for page, but I would say you have an interesting approach to for not to spoil anything too much for the book, but there are some pages in there, not even just action shots, like kind of when you're introducing characters and things where you kind of play with the size of the page and how the panels kind of cross with each other, some action shots with like arrows flying and stuff like that. Was that kind of like a collaboration between everybody? Was that just you making your own thing, Jay, or how did that come about?
I think most of it was kind of playing around with what was there. I'm trying to think of some specific ones. I'm a big proponent for composition, panel and page. You know, I study a lot of Darwin Cook, David Mazzucchelli's another. Guys that just really have their composition dialed in. And with I teach art at a junior college, and that's one thing I'm always impressing on my drawing students is, you know, while you're rendering and your ability to actually draw things is catching up to you, work on composition, because it's an area where you can put in a little bit of study and reap huge rewards. And I try to be as aware as I can of that interpanel, those kinds of relationships and directional energies that I can create to lead the eye from one place to another and in and through to create a smooth and intuitive reading experience.
Yeah, and I think one of the pages specifically is, you know, like kind of the final battle that we get with like the necromancer and stuff like that was a really, really cool sequence.
And don't let Jay overcomplicate it with flowery talk of composition and such.
Right.
He literally is a problem solver, because there are pages in the script that I sent him that was very fun to write and was not easy, or maybe not even possible to draw the way that I had written it originally. And so he came back to the table. He didn't just say, no, this doesn't work, let's redo it. He's like, okay, let me think on this for a moment. And then he came back with some of those non-standard or really creative, panel breakdowns that you're talking about.
Right.
And he fixed problems that I didn't realize were problems until he brought it up on the page. And then I'm like, wow, what an elegant solution. So he's an excellent problem solver on top of just being an excellent artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to jump in real quick, because this will actually kind of bridge over to Leland. But I thought the one page that the panels were kind of diagonal and almost triangular, and the way it flows along with the lettering could have been very complicated and confusing. But I think the two of you came together really well and created this page that flowed so nicely, while being very unique. And that was the one thing that really stood out to me in that page in particular, was just like, I love this unique paneling along with the lettering, bringing everything together, really helping me through the page and flow without being like, wait, do I go here or here? Or nope, you just go straight through it, like almost like an S, just bam.
Yep.
Yeah.
Leland's wonderful. He letters my solo book, Hush Ronin, and there's some pages in there where I feel like the art was okay, but the lettering completes it. I would say it complements it. It was the missing aspect, and it's not just the verbiage that you read. It's part of it. Really becomes part of the art.
Yeah. And I guess Leland, you could talk about that a little more, because with my experience working with a letterer, it's like I can't visualize that until I see it on a page, and the work that gets done, it's like, wow, that's way better than I would ever expected. So, I mean, there is a skill to doing that and making sure that it flows through the page. So I guess you could talk about how you got involved with that
lettering is you. I don't know. You have to. I feel like there's a certain personality type, which is probably just anal retentive, that makes you a good letterer. Like, actually, like right now, I'm looking at my screen here and noticing I'm the only one with I've got my phone in vertical orientation. It's really bothering me. Like, yeah, that's a great example.
That's total letterer right there. Yeah.
Of letterer brain. So yeah, that's, you need to be the most annoyed, right? You need to be in the 99th percentile of being bothered by inconsistencies and patterns and stuff like that. That really helps make good lettering. And yeah, it's to just jump back to the origin story thing for a minute. It's very cool because Jason and I basically simultaneously collaborated with Jay independently.
Mhm.
So as Jason was getting in touch with Jay to do Thistle, I had an editing job on a book called Hallowed North that Jay was also drawing, and so yeah, it was this funny sort of small world, Twitter comics community thing where we're all this like, oh, this community it might be global, but it's much smaller than
There's a lot of
than you think
crossover.
it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to do some work with Jay there, and then yeah, we did some shorts. We did some shorts together, and then yeah, Thistle, Hush Ronin. Like, it's very nice because Jay's art is incredible, but he works. I've talked about this in interviews before. He uses softer brushes than a lot of other comics artists, and it was at first it was a challenge to kind of match his art. That's something I really care about as a letterer, is to try to at least get as close to the artist style as I can, so that the lettering feels like it belongs. That's the thing that irks me when you have like a painterly style and then you just have these vector balloons slapped down on top of it, and it's like, oh, the lettering is from another world. So yeah, that was a challenge at first to kind of get in the groove. But now I've lettered 150, 200 pages of we're getting up there now of Jay's art, and it's like, it feels good. It's like, it's really cool to have an ongoing collaborator with which it's like, oh, we have like a rapport.
Right. The history there. Yeah. The experience. Yep.
I always feel bad for letterers a little bit because I always say like they're the unsung hero of comics, because when they're bad, we all notice. But when you do your job,
you
just
it flows. It flows really nicely. Yeah. There's definitely,
unless you're really paying attention, which that one page I was talking about earlier in particular was one where I was just like, hot damn, like the artist and the letterer came together in this page to really make something that was cool and flowed really well. But
nice, thank you. Yeah, that page was a ton of fun.
I'll sing Leland's praises just like I did for Jay. So Leland pays attention to that, and that flow piece, like you say, is it's a skill that you develop, and it's not something that happens automatically, and it's not something that every letterer has instinctively, right? And so I talked about how we, and we still to this day try and meet, if it's not weekly, then monthly, workshops or whatever current project we're working on. We're working on those things, and we're getting feedback from each other and a couple other people in our workshop group about things like page layout, about how the lettering's looking. Is it flowing? Does it make sense? So we study that just as much as we study the script, just as much as we examine the art and the panel composition. And so Leland's an excellent writer in his own right. And so storytelling is much part of his skill set as just doing the lettering itself. So Leland understands the whole purpose of the page, and that comes through with his lettering. And so the fact that you were immediately able to follow that page with the unusual layout, which was Jay fixing a problem that I introduced, not realizing I had done so, and then Leland essentially putting the finishing touches on what was already a beautiful piece of art, and it just came together. But that's due to that purposefulness in really wanting to make sure that the entire experience is cohesive. And Leland, like he says, is addicted to detail, and he doesn't just take for granted that it's enough just to put the word balloon on and just move on, right, and get it done by a certain time. It's like, does it actually make sense? Does this make sense to a reader? And do I like it? Does it actually look like it fits with the art?
And one more thing to sing Leland's praises here. What I also notice with lettering as well is your sound effects and stuff like that. I'd say you have a way of incorporating I would say either the material or the action within that, of like you like an axe being thrown, or like you have it spiraling, and then there's a few interactions going on. I'm not trying to give away too much of the book because we want everybody to go read it and back the book, but like even just like boots scuffing on the floor, things cracking, it all has a different style and flair to it, which I always do appreciate reading books because that's something I pay attention to more now. But it's not just the boring like giant capitalized letters for everything, you know what I mean? So I think that's a cool approach to have.
Well, thanks guys.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel like we've talked about the lettering enough.
Hey, yeah, all right. We never talk about lettering on here. I think it's a unique interview. Yeah, I think it's a unique interview for us to have everybody here together for the project.
Yeah, right on. No, I mean, I love talking about lettering, but I'm just like,
yeah.
Well, to kind of build off what he just said, and then Leland, we'll let you sit in the corner for a little bit, like, you know, good letter. But like your sound effects, not only like Mike just said, are they really cool and everything, but the way they're built into the art really make it feel like I'm watching a movie and I hear the pluck of the arrow or the splat of the blood, or, you know, whatever else is going on. Like,
right on.
It's much more unique than just a bam pow. As much as Mike and I love 60s Batman, like it's much more than that. It really does add to the atmosphere of the action sequences and everything. It's loved it.
The sound effects.
I mean, part of that, like I get some Jason. I mean, Jason's amazing to collaborate with because he knows what he wants when he's really got a precise vision, and he also at times he'll kind of lay back and be like, hey, you guys can play here. And that's, you know, that's always fun to not be, you know, sometimes you've got tight constraints, sometimes you've got a page like the one we talked about earlier, and other times it really is like, you know, there'll literally be a note in the script like, letterer, let's come up with a cool, you know, art style for the magic system, you know, letterer, what do you think's a good, you know, what do you think's a good sound for a zombie's skull being split open? So that's, you know, that's fun. I get to put a little bit of my own stamp on things, and then we go back and forth and iterate and make something that makes us both super happy. And yeah, I think that shows in the final product.
So Jason's a step above me, who's just like, have fun with it. Just
the sound effects are in the script. Most of the sound effects that are there are, for the most part, in the script, except for the ones where Leland chose to add something and said, let's put this here, and of course it totally makes sense, and then he's able to do it. And to go back to that axe throwing scene that you're talking about, that was one that Leland and I specifically worked on because I wanted to have, I knew how important it was, and Chris, you touched on it perfectly, which was it makes it cinematic. That sound of the axe cutting the air as the throwing axe flies through the air. But the page is busy, it's a smaller panel, you don't have a lot of room to put something in there. How do we do that creatively in a way that it just adds to the immersion for the reader, makes it really cool? And then Leland and I workshopped it together, and we came up with the sound effect that we used where the sound is smaller, farther away, and louder as it gets closer to the reader. And it was just this elegant solution that he was able to just add it to the page in such a way that it perfectly blended in. But it totally was, as Leland said, I had this idea in my mind of what I wanted it to sound like in my head, and then it came to life like that. And so that is also the strength of Leland and I's collaboration over a few different books now, and over several years. We have a shorthand where we can just quickly throw something back and forth in short form messages, and then the next day we've got it on the page, and we're already studying it. It works out. So that's my great fortune, which I totally recognize, having people like Jay and Leland as my collaborators.
Yeah, I think, and it really pays off in the final product here. I mean, Chris and I really enjoyed this as being fantasy fans. And my question for Jay is, how hard is it to draw fire? Because that seems like a tough thing to do.
Honestly, fire at this point is one of the easier things.
Okay, I mean, yeah,
it's kind of a little formulaic, but there's a few patterns and things. And I'm always kind of looking to tweak it or improve it a little bit on observation, like summer barbecues, especially if it's like a charcoal grill. I'll sit there and watch the coals ignite for a little bit and see what's going on.
You're getting you're brushing up on it to be like, okay, if I have to set somebody on fire, I know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I will say, I mean, you have experience. You talked about Hush Ronan, drawing in like a fantasy realm, I would say. But to me, looking at the art, I mean, it looks like this is in your wheelhouse. Like I would say your art definitely fits this like sword and sorcery fantasy vibe. Is that something you've become comfortable with? Like, was that like, okay, I'm not necessarily drawing, Ronins and that sort of era, but like these types of characters, was that something you were interested in doing? It felt right for you, or?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of what I did just early on in learning to draw and illustrate, I was very, very heavy into Lord of the Rings, and I would do my own sort of depictions of like, the attack on Weathertop with the Nazgul coming in toward the fire, and it isn't something I've stuck with consistently throughout the years. I did a lot of it early on because I've had a lifelong obsession with swords. In fact, I brought a couple of my elven swords with me. I've got
nice. Yeah.
And Sting with me today.
Oh, that's amazing. There you go. For reference, of course, you're not battling anybody at
absolutely
home.
You may notice a lot of the swords, and this will have a hilt very similar to this.
Yep.
I like that design.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely challenging. I do a lot of like some more realistic. I'm working on a graphic novel set in 1969 Hollywood. And sometimes those pages just breeze right by as far as being able to put them together and compose them, because they're just kind of pedestrian everyday elements, people in regular clothes, believable real settings. In a fantasy setting, the characters are anthropomorphic, but everything else is very exotic. The armor, the clothing has a lot of different details that you just don't necessarily draw every day. But yeah, it's definitely getting a lot more comfortable.
Yeah.
I thought personally what stood out to me throughout the book was we had basically 3 distinct areas we were in throughout the book. At the beginning, in this kind of cave between, almost felt like it was between realms, almost like we were sitting at the table setting up for the adventure if we're playing D&D
or something. Yeah, exactly. That's what
it was
like
very
Yep.
simple but dark and dreary, and maybe a lot of that goes to the colorist for how that's set up. But then in the next area, we're kind of in this post battle sequence where everything's been kind of knocked down and there's not a ton of background, so you're able to focus on the characters and what's going on. And you start to think like, okay, the artist is really focused on the characters and the moment here and what's going on. But then we're sucked into this other area as the story progresses that's very in the woods. And you've got this cool temple in the background, one of the panels, and you've got this mountainside that has vines going down it, and you get really intricate with the background.
Yep.
So I guess I'm just gushing about the backgrounds, but how was it going through the different terrains here and thinking like, I got to do more or different things with these different backgrounds, and how much went into that for you?
Quite a lot of thought. There's the cave, like you said, that I don't say like I'm always looking for an opportunity to fudge things or make it easier for myself, but I'm always looking for an opportunity to fudge things or make it easier for myself. And like the cave and the shadows, it allowed for a lot of like chiaroscuro, like moody lighting and all of that, which was fun. And then the jungle is when I kind of if I hit any obstacles, that's where it was at, because it comes down to the details and how much like hanging vines, how detailed am I going to get on the canopy as far as individual leaves? Am I going to show a few kind of in the foreground and then just fade it out to these like larger organic shapes moving into the background? As it transitions into the more devastated landscapes, that becomes a lot easier. Everything's torched. It's just a matter of how many tree stumps to put and where to put, a charred body or something. And then, moving back into the jungle, I think having gotten to working on it in sequence, basically page for page, I worked, just straight through page 1 to page done. Having the early experiences in the jungle really helped make the later sort of return under the forest canopy a lot stronger than I think it might have been if I had been working out of order, or if there hadn't been a previous setup with similar backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And just to expand on our colorist, so our colorist is WK Sahadiwa, Warnia Sahadiwa. She's a colorist based out of Indonesia. She's done work for several different smaller publishers. She's got a great backlog of work as well. But she was also a bit of a dark horse, because I had to do a sort of an open call for colorists, and I tried out a few colorists before meeting Nia, and she actually ended up being a referral from another colorist who had to pass on the project due to their schedule, but they said, you should talk to this colorist, she's excellent. And so it was a bit of a blind shot. I just had her do some test pages. But ironically, what you're speaking to in terms of the jungle, one of the test pages was one of the jungle shots, because I knew how important it would be to have that brightness and that contrast, and then also lighting. And so lighting was something that was hugely important, and another one that not every colorist sometimes has it as their one of their key focuses when they're thinking about how they color the page.
Right.
And Nia's work, and Leland and I have talked about this, Nia's work literally got stronger as the book went on, because we both talk about the fact that Jay's art is not easy to color. He just spoke a moment ago about how much detail is too much detail, and how much time is he going to spend on this. The book is gorgeous. You can see that reflected in the art, but now it's the colorist's task to then bring that to life and to breathe into it. And it just gets better and better as she spent more and more time on the book. So we're super fortunate that way as well, in that we didn't start off with the same collaborative history with our colorist that we did with the three of us. But she's done a phenomenal job, and we're really happy that she got to be part of the project.
Yeah, it's unfortunate she's not here, because we could gush about her as well.
Yeah.
Because
I'm sorry, guys. I'm dying.
Oh no!
I think we're losing Leland.
Oh, I think he meant if his phone was dying.
Maybe.
So we're gonna go ahead and drop Leland here for a second.
Yeah. He'll be forever immortalized with that photo. Oh, okay.
That's right.
Well, now he'll be happy we have a more even panel distribution. So
that's right.
But I was just gonna say, her colors throughout it, I think you're correct in that they get better and better as they go along. But so yeah, as I was saying, after this amazing cut that I just did with the magic of editing,
seamless.
Yeah,
Seamless.
nobody even noticed. Why did I even bring it up? Nobody noticed.
Nobody even noticed.
Yeah. Jason, I really hope I'm not spoiling too much, but it's unfortunate the colorist isn't here, because I love the coloring throughout this. And there's a panel where there's flesh melting, and her colors are so good. And there's fire coming out of the eyes of the character, and just everything about it brings Jay's art full circle with everything going on. So I once again, I'm just gushing about how much I enjoy aspects of the book, but I don't know if there's a question there other than to say, great choice in colorist.
I want to let Jay, because Jay has talked to me a couple times about how much he's enjoyed seeing Nia's colors on his art. But just to that specific page you're talking about, no spoilers, because it's a scene that happens early in the story. If you're going to back the Kickstarter, which we of course sincerely hope you will, if you're a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of old school 4-color dark fantasy, this is the comic for you in that regard. That's one of the early scenes that I wrote as part of the story, and it was really important to me, because it really transformed it from just a classic fantasy story, and not wanting it to just be an adventurer going off on a quest story. That's not what the story is meant to be, but something that's really horrific and really shapes what's to come and what's happening, and how dire the straits are for the main character, right? And so that's one of the early scenes that I wrote, and it was really important to me that we get that right. And so Jay's line art alone, of course, was stupendous for that. So again, through the magic of editing, this will be just a seamless transition. But I was just describing how important the scene was with the the melting flesh and the horror of that scene. They're really amping up the
Yeah.
horror aspect of our fantasy horror comic. But if you want to talk just about what Nia's coloring has meant to you for this story, and especially on that scene of the skull and so forth, and just when I showed that to you for the first time, just what your impressions were, because I know you and I talked about that before.
Oh yeah, yeah. Something I when I get to work with a new colorist, which is happening more and more frequently these days, and the thing that has become a mark to me of a good colorist is when I look at the art and I don't necessarily recognize my own work anymore, or it takes me a second to realize, oh wait a minute, those are my lines. Like, that sort of transformative effect that color can have on black and white line art. And Nia absolutely knocked it out of the park with so many of those, and the melting flesh panel in particular. That was so much fun to draw, and to see the, like, you could feel the heat coming off of it. Like that was one of those, like, okay, we're in business here. Like that was, I'm going to say I was uncertain or anything like that, but seeing where we were at in production on the book, and Jason mentioned auditioning.
Yeah, in Nia's work brings that very transformative effect to the work. I like it when I can look at a page that I've drawn and see it in color, and it takes a second for me to recognize that, oh, I did that. Not the color, obviously, but the line art, and this particular panel, the melting face. Before I went suddenly mute there, I was just saying how well she nailed that, where you can really feel the heat coming off of it. I mean, it was enormously fun to draw, as grisly as it is, but it's similar to Leland's lettering, where it works on its own until you get that other element, and then you see what it's been missing and what actually completes it. And his colors absolutely did that.
Definitely.
And yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Jason, I had two things I want to jump into, because I know we want to talk a little bit about the campaign itself before we wrap up. But one is, I wanted to say, while Mike tends to be more of a like Lord of the Rings style fantasy guy, I am not really a Lord of the Rings style fantasy guy. I like playing D&D. I like Conan the Barbarian and books like Barbaric and that kind of fantasy. But what I have noticed over the years is that when it is a really dark fantasy story, I am attracted to it. So I think of Philip Kennedy Johnson's Last Gods as a book that I really enjoyed. And one thing as I was reading this book, I enjoyed about it is this might be a weird comparison, but stick with me here. It felt like Saving Private Ryan with elves.
I've not heard that one. I hadn't had that thought, but I'm not going to shy away from it. It's not a comparison I would make directly myself, because you're always way too humble to think of yourself in that kind of thing. But I appreciate the compliment, and it's not far off, because yes, that was probably the vein I was going for, the tone I was going for. A desperation, like an absolute desperation moment. And the whole comic, the whole first issue, which was purposeful on my part to write it as this was the kind of fantasy story that I wanted to write. And I'm a fan of both worlds. Like, I mean, of course I love Tolkien, and I love the epic fantasy stories, but I had said to Leland early days, before the script was finalized or anything else, I said, it's very intentional on my part that I don't want to write the hero's origin story. I don't want to write the hero's journey in the traditional sense.
Good
and I absolutely don't want to write the Lord of the Rings knockoff for the umpteenth time. We've read those stories. We love those stories. They're some of our favorite stories, but not a story that Jason wants to write. This is what I wanted to do instead. I wanted to do something that would be like, we're at the end. We're at the finale. Like, so much has already been lost. And how do we deal with it in that moment? And that was the starting point where I wanted to take this story and go with it.
And that's like the last push you need at the end of the war, kind of thing. And like you said, that dark fantasy too is I'm a huge fan of. And one of my favorite panels is just like, we get to see a bunch of the undead, I'll say. One of the big panel shots, and it's just like this book throughout. There's a lot of fun things for me as a D&D player, as actually a DM for our group. But when you're building those stories and those campaigns, the fun part is adding things like enchanted weapons and traps and all this other stuff for like the group to come upon. It's like, how are you going to use this weapon within or piece of equipment within your story, within your realm, when shit's hitting the fan?
Yeah.
And there's a moment in the book, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but like there's a moment in the book where you have like a surprise like that. And I think it's especially it needs to be done more. And I think in fantasy storytelling, which is what you did, it's like, I have a plain old sword, or I have a plain old bow. It's like, we're in a fantastical realm here. Things can be enchanted, they can be magic. So I think just those little tweaks to make a scene more interesting, right? Instead of just like, I'm just going to hit somebody with a sword. It's like, why not have it enchanted and the characters don't always know how to use it properly, that sort of thing, right? So
get out of my head, Mike.
Yeah. No, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. Like maybe you noticed that maybe.
Yeah, and let me address that just real fast.
Yeah.
Just so, I always say the gray in the beard is authentic. I'm old as dirt, Gen X kid who grew up on comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, and Saturday morning cartoons. And so I've been a lifelong gamer my whole life. I'm a freelance tabletop role-playing game designer on the side, on top of being a freelance comic book writer on the side. So I enjoy both worlds. I live in both worlds. Both worlds hugely influenced me as a writer, and I've got a regular table that meets weekly to this day that I'm so nice. Privileged to get to game with. But I had also said to Leland early days, I said this was really important, that I didn't want to write a D&D comic. I didn't want this just to be Dungeons and Dragons with serial numbers filed off, where the classic stereotypes are there. There's classic tropes. There's like what I described as 4-color fantasy. We have elves and humans and dwarves and magic and undead, and you're fighting, and it's all medieval, and it all looks very, very familiar. And fans of Dungeons and Dragons, 100%. Fans of Conan the Barbarian, as Chris said, 100%. This comic is going to be just amazing for you. But I wanted it to be a story about survival, not just a story about an adventurer who goes off to save the world. So, but things like, having magic weapons, if you're going to have magic, great. That's one thing. If you're going to have magic weapons, which is a huge classic fantasy trope and Dungeons and Dragons storytelling element, but doing it in a way that's interesting, do it in a way that's creative, because I want to use it for the story that the reader discovers it at the same time that the character does. Mm-hmm. That was part of what that was, and the scene that you're talking about, and then getting to do something fun where I can give something to Jay and say, here's how we're going to take this magic weapon and use it on the page, and then do something really fun with it. And that was really important to me, where it becomes a really good dark fantasy story and not just a D&D adventure.
No, I think it came together really nicely.
And just the second part to my question was the issue reads as a one-shot comic. Like we get the story, it concluded at the end, and I could never read another Thistle book and be happy with the story I read. At the same time, you have labeled it as issue 1. So are there more stories inside the Thistle universe, or is this a one shot and you're moving on to the next thing?
No, there's absolutely more stories, dependent upon the beautiful people that hopefully are watching and listening to this right now. If they back us and they back the Kickstarter and they help us make it a success, there's a reason it says issue 1 on the cover, right? Because there's more to come. And I've got multiple issues plotted out immediately following this issue of what happens next in the story. I would be incredibly lucky to be able to tell those stories. I would be incredibly privileged to collaborate with Jay and Leland and with our colorist Nia. If the readership wants it, if the backers support us and they say, we like this and we want more, it's ready to go as soon as they give us the green light.
Yeah,
great.
You definitely want more, everybody. Trust me.
Yeah, we definitely want more. And I'll say this too. I mean, while this is coming out the day before, as we're talking the day before the launches on Kickstarter. If you don't think you can remember a whole 24 hours from now, you can actually go to the page and get notified about the launch before we can see all the goodies coming out. Go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say I don't know if you're going for the wrap up, Mike, but before we go for the wrap up, yeah, everybody can go and get the reminder. Go do that so you remember to back it on day one.
Mm-hmm.
But for those people that do that, what can they expect from the campaign? I mean, bunch of covers. Do you have special swords that you're made? Like, what kind of tiers can people expect?
Is there a sword tier? Oh yeah. Yes.
Sword tier will be on issue 2. You got everybody helps. Everybody helps us get there. We'll,
at least the foam sword.
Jay will help us design the sword tier. Absolutely,
a foam sword would be good.
Listen, we got early bird special, 48 hours, both for PDF and for physical backers. So that's going to be available on day 1 and day 2. So people absolutely want to get in early to take advantage of that nice little discount on either the digital PDF copy or the physical copy. There are 2 covers, so I kept it simple. I didn't want to go gimmicky. I didn't want to go with a lot of variants. I wanted to give people a clear choice. We've got Jay's just outstanding cover that you can see, which is the one also behind me here, the red one, which is a little small in the background. And then there's the second cover. I've already been teasing it. The variant cover, I've already been teasing it on my social media accounts, so you can go and find it there. But it is by Heather Vaughn, who is just a phenomenal artist in her own right. She does a ton of crazy cover work. She did the variant cover for Leland's book Capsules, so that you can see an example of that as well. And that's the second one here behind me with the leering skull with the big eyeball staring at you. Again, setting that tone where same as you guys got the sort of the preview copy, so did Heather. And then Heather was given very little instruction. I'm like, this is the comic. This is what we're going for. Can you give me your first impression in terms of what you want to do? And that variant covers what she came back with. And so there's a variant cover, which is a physical reward only. So you have to back it on the physical tier to get that. And you can get both covers, of course, as a bulk tier. And then we've got some nice bundles. We've got a couple of cool add-ons. We got a pin. We can get you some signed copies of the comics. And then we've got even some amazing stretch goals, which if everybody is super generous and maybe not just for yourself, but tell your D&D group, tell your friends, tell your comic book store, anybody that you know that loves fantasy and loves comics that you think would be into this, and you get them to come join us. We've even got some really cool stretch goals that we would love to help showcase with everybody as well.
No, that's awesome. And all the more reason to hop in and back as soon as possible with that 48-hour early bird. I know that's going to get me to jump in there.
Okay,
and one last,
come on.
One last pitch. The comic is done. So writing, art, colors, letters, you guys have seen it, of course. So we it was purposeful to complete the comic so that the backers go in knowing there's no risk here. What you're helping us fund is the shipping and the delivery and all of the pieces that goes, printing and shipping, of course, so we can get it into your hands, but also to help us hopefully be as successful as we can to allow us to do issue 2. But this is such a perfect indie comic book Kickstarter because there's no risk to the backer. The comic is completed. You just need to come in and support us and bring some of your friends with you to do the same.
Real quick, to anybody out there, it's a future comic creator. What Jason just said, there's key. Finish the book, then put it on Kickstarter. I understand some people can't 100% do that, but that's key. Like, nothing's more frustrating than the funds are out of my account and I get the update like, we'll start doing the book now. It's like, oh, come on.
I'll get it. I'll see it in like 13 months.
Nothing is more frustrating. Like, out of pocket, like you guys got to do it. And the book is complete and we've seen it. I'm sure other people have seen it too. And so we know that it's going to be done as soon as it gets funded. So
it's very cool. It's very dark fantasy. And I know Chris and I really enjoyed it. And I will say this, just because you guys are on the show, we don't enjoy all the books that we get sent. So I will say that. And we're pretty honest about it. We'll be like, hey, this really wasn't my cup of tea. But yeah, people like it. No, we really did enjoy this. As far as I do think there's a lapse in fantasy definitely within mainstream comics, within some of the indie publishers, they're getting into it a little bit. But I would say this story I have not seen, like you said, the little tweaks. It's not your run of the mill story. It was something enjoyable that I felt I was missing within the space of comics. So I do think people are going to back something that's really good here if they're looking for that.
And Mike, like, we're having a good time here. You had to call it Travis Gibb real quick for us not liking his comics. Like,
Yeah, well, I know. Come
Love
on,
you, Travis. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
love you, Travis.
I'm just
No,
kidding.
no. I like his books too, I guess. But yeah, it comes out tomorrow, everybody. While we have all you guys here, do we have anywhere you want to send the viewers, the listeners? I don't know if you individually want to shout out your social media stuff. Just have at it here. I don't know, Jason, if you want
Yeah,
to start.
real fast. So
Yeah.
I'm JL Collins on Linktree. It has a link to all of my published work, comics, tabletop role-playing games. I did a short story for Wizards of the Coast way back in the day.
Nice.
It also has links to an actual play that I did where I was game master for a Star Wars actual play back in October of this past year. That's on the Dungeon Scrawlers channel. All 4 episodes are linked on my Linktree account. You can find it there. You can also find it under a pinned post on my Twitter. I'm digital_Collins on the site formerly known as Twitter. I'm Digital Collins with no underscore on Blue Sky, but Linktree has a link to my socials as well as all the other fun stuff that I've worked on, and happy to share that with everybody.
Nice.
How about you, Leland?
Yeah, everybody can find me at Leland Writes on Linktree. There's links to my award-winning short comics.
Nice.
You can hire me on there to edit or letter your comic. Yeah, that's one-stop shopping. Or go to Jason or Jay's stuff and you'll find me.
Right. Awesome.
Just whipping that award-winning dick right out, man.
Oh yeah,
That's
If you can't big yourself up, nobody else is gonna.
Yeah.
you gotta sell yourself.
That was awesome. Yep.
Hey, Jay, how about you, man?
I keep my social media stuff pretty universal. It's just at Shiekopedia on X, Instagram, Threads. I'm on Blue Sky, all under the same at Shiekopedia. It's my last name, APEDIA. There's also my website, which is just jshiek.com, like you see there at the side of the screen. I keep a pretty good selection of my current and past work up there in terms of comics and illustration. I have some links to the artwork I did for a museum exhibit in Boston, kind of outside of comics, that got featured in the New York Times at the end of last year.
Cool.
Bunch of fun stuff. I need to update it a little more frequently than I do, but there's also a form on there if you want to hire me to draw a book or pin up or a museum exhibit, whatever you got.
Nice. Awesome.
Very nice. And everybody out there, you know the drill. Show notes down below will have all these links. Most importantly, the Kickstarter, which I promise you need to fund.
Yep.
Guys, thank you so much for taking the time. Like any good fantasy book, we lost some people along the way. They got resurrected. And now we are here at the end of the adventure all together. So thank you all so much for your time. And we look forward to the next time we get to talk to y'all.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, guys.